Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Zach Taylor. I'm the Digital Lab and Online Learning Manager here at the Santa Fe Workshops, and we are just about ready to get started. If you're seeing me, hearing me, and seeing this screen, you're all set to go. One final reminder that if any portion of this screen is cropped on your end, at the top of your monitor, there is a View Options button. There you can adjust the ratio of your monitor to be fit to screen. That will prevent anything from being cropped on your end during the presentation. At this time, I would like to go ahead and invite in Reed Callanan to get the program started. Reed?
Thank you, Zach. Welcome, everybody. Creativity Continues tonight at Santa Fe Workshops with an evening of storytelling and an evening focused on how photography and in particular workshops change our lives. So tonight we're going to hear stories about workshops, and I hope they will be inspiring and humorous, and I'm sure they'll be fun. So I think we're in for a treat this evening. My name is Reed Callanan, and I have spent my entire life, my entire adult life, I should say, involved in workshops. From the age of 22 to 36, I was in Rockport, Maine at the Maine Photographic Workshops, and then from 37 to now 68 years old, I am in Santa Fe with the Santa Fe Workshops. So needless to say, I have a lot of workshop stories to tell. A lot. But tonight's not about me, so that's going to be another night. I save you all from my stories. And tonight we're going to listen to stories from Elizabeth Opalenik, who has spent the last year of her life devoted to this book project. You saw the cover of the book before we entered the evening, and it's called Workshop Stories, Changing Through Photography. It's an amazing, epic project that she did. She herded photographers, which is more difficult than herding cats, to get her stories and pictures and bios, and it really was an amazing journey that she endeavored to take and has done really well. And so the book is soon to be printed and soon to be published and soon to be in all of our hands. So we're all excited about that. Tonight, we're going to honor and celebrate the work that Elizabeth has done on this book project and tell some stories about how workshops have changed the lives of 6 individuals. We start off with Elizabeth talking about her experiences in workshops and talking a little about the book. So she has about 20 minutes to tell you her stories and talk about the book. And then we're going to invite 5 other of our great instructors to tell their workshop stories. So we have on the East Coast, we have John Paul Capenegro. Middle of the country, we have Jim Richardson. And in Santa Fe, we have Alan Ross and Jennifer Spellman and Rennie Hyduk. So the 6 of them are going to entertain you. And also want to let you know that we will be taking questions from you at the end of the program. So we're thinking about this ending about 10 minutes to the hour. So that will leave us 10 or 15 minutes for Q&A. So at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you will see a Q&A feature. And you can open that up and you can type in your questions. So you can type them in for a particular person or just in general for the group to answer. And then at the end of the presentation, Zach and I will take turns asking questions of our presenters. So please join in the fun and ask questions as we move through the evening. So first up, I'd like to introduce you to a dear friend of mine who I met in 1979 in Rockport. And we were working together in Rockport at the Maine workshops, and we've been lifelong friends, I think 42 years, if I count correctly, since 1979. And that's a long time. And it's been a great friendship that Elizabeth and I have forged together. So I'm honored and pleased and proud to present to all of you, Elizabeth, to take us through the process of herding these cats, these photographers, and then tell us some stories about your experience working in a variety of different workshops. So Elizabeth, thanks for being here this evening and spearheading us in this adventure. So it's all yours now.
Okay, well, Reed, I'm so grateful to you and to the Santa Fe workshops. And I didn't say this anywhere else, but in truth, you were the one that gave me the first residency up in Maine to come back to the workshops after my first 2-week class and after one residency. And I know that it put me on a path that may have been different. So I'm incredibly grateful to you. So I love you. And I will say that out openly. I just love you. And I've loved all the time we've had together during
Thank
these
you.
40
I
some
love you
years.
too.
Big kisses to you. I think we should just get started because I'm anxious to also hear from all these other people. So I'm going to start talking. This is about, workshops. It's prompted certainly to raise awareness. So if we're up on the start, Zach, we can start up with the first slide and we can go from there. Are we ready to get started, sweetie? Thank you. Okay, so the talk is about workshops, but it's prompted certainly to raise awareness for the book Workshop Stories, but it's more to me about the gifts of workshops and the opportunities that are created throughout a career that made it possible to even conjure that book into existence. In truth, if I only told one powerful workshop story today, it should be enough for everyone to be grateful that places like the Santa Fe workshops exist. Workshop Stories, Changed Through Photography, has over 100 stories, but I'm just going to sort of discuss my career with Santa Fe and where I have taught for them. Without these connections, I might have been on another path, so I want to start again by saying thank you to Reed. You've been there from the very beginnings, and you were very lovely to invite me as a new teacher to start teaching in 1990 when the Santa Fe workshops began. My first class in Santa Fe did not go, but I came to support Reed in his new journey and had some of the most amazing days of my photographic career, giving myself, like all students, that gift of time that week. I learned a valuable lesson, and that is to treat your subject with respect, no matter the situation. At the Mineshaft Bar in Madrid, I noticed Jimmy Joe, a burly soul of tattoos, leather, and chains, sitting in a beam of light with a child. I had been working on a series called Single Men and Their Relationship to Their Children, and I thought, oh, if there is a God, that kid belongs to that guy, and I want to photograph them. My friend Linda and I were exploring the towns outside of Santa Fe, which were still rough around the edges in 1990. So scout first, leave the cameras in the car, but my wide Lux was sitting on the bar. The bartender confirmed, but warned, don't mess with Jimmy Joe. He's a bad dude, head of the Banditos, a notorious motorcycle club to rival the Hells Angels. Off the bar stool without another thought until I was standing in front of a very intense stare. And Charlie Manson came to mind, but I thought I was committed to my quest. We chatted over the beer that I offered to buy, and he ultimately agreed to do a portrait outside. The only stipulation, the images not end up on the post office wall. Should have been a clue. I raced out of the bar, tripping over Greg Heisler, who was about to come in. No, Greg, you can't go in there, knowing Greg was one of the few workshops that I've ever taken and that he would also love that beam of light. I think Jimmy Joe trusted me because I shared my camera with his kid and allowed him to take pictures of us. He showed me his Bandito tattoos, but he wouldn't allow me to make that picture. Today I might have gotten it, but he did invite us to his camp, wanting our opinion on artwork made by the boy's mother, who was definitely on heroin. Using that invitation opened all the other doors the rest of the day as we roamed through Golden, Cerrillos, Galisteo, all those little towns, each character along the way, incredulous. You photographed Jimmy Joe? He let you? You can't go to his trailer in the mountains. He's a really bad dude. He had a narc locked in the trunk of his car in the desert. Yet, this is the picture I set out to capture of Jimmy Joe, the man that loved and protected his child. The man I dealt with only on that level. A bond of trust had been formed, and I knew he would not hurt us. We did get into the truck the next day and go into the mountains where he lived, in spite of all the warnings. I returned to the bar with pictures, but there had been a shooting 2 nights later and someone had died. He had gone underground again, though he had nothing to do with that. He did ultimately end up back in jail and dead when someone threw acid in his face, which was a revenge hit. It doesn't matter. That day in my mind was so much more important in its lessons for me as a teacher going forward. To quote Arno from his story in the book, art is risk made visible. And that's why workshops work, why teaching stints on our resumes are not about what we got and get, but about what we gave and give. I did teach in Santa Fe for over 25 years of transitioning from infrared film and Polaroid manipulations at locations like Los Luceros into exploring digital color in that subdued light of that wonderful historical haven. Among its stage set interiors with antique bathtubs to its magical infrared locations for models with exterior bogs of cottonwood all set on the Rio Grande. Every workshop in Santa Fe offers a different possibility and laughter, including Christopher James' wet plate collodion class that I was gifted for my 65th birthday by Reed, Christopher, and my husband. Among other classmates, Keith Carter and Eddie Soloway here with Christopher, all in the book, and the hand of Cotton Miller leaning in, who assisted and currently teaches web design and color printing at the workshops. He brilliantly built the Workshop Stories website. This all was a labor of love. I often demonstrated a situation as a starting point for my students. Water almost always played a part, even in Santa Fe desert, wet everything. It's a class at the Galisteo location that will never leave me, and why, really, I taught. When speaking with Jolene last week for permission to share this story, she sent me her images and the article she later wrote. This particular moment, I remember wetting the fabric, tucking it into the lips more predominantly of the model, focusing on their beauty. My intent was on the left. The next morning, observing the student's edit, I was struck by how different her image felt and commented about intention in the same situation. Tears started and a very personal story began to unfold. I cleared the room. We were all editing together. I cleared the room as I hugged her and I listened. This brave woman went on to share her story of being bound, gagged, repeatedly raped, then left for dead. Her images are on the right. My hand, no doubt, a memory trigger. She later shared with all of the class and truly processed the breakthrough moment through her photographs with her therapist. Everyone brings their personal story to an image, even 31 years later. Photographs are self-portraits. I will never forget that transformational moment of a class bonding, the power of a photograph to be the visual voice for stories left behind, and the willingness of students to trust and bare their souls during workshops. Santa Fe Workshops began producing for National Geographic expeditions, and between 2003 and 2008, Reed asked me if I would organize them in Venice, Tuscany, and Provence, which I already knew well from conducting my own travel workshops in those locations. A good break from my head classes and a chance to co-teach with so many icons. I involved my Tuscan assistant, Deanna Grandi, a former assistant there and partner. And though these were not the focus of the classes, she was great for demos. Here we are in Avignon on the carousel sharing panning techniques with Catherine Carnow's class. I love that I could observe the way others taught, and I could observe my world in different ways while listening to Jim Stanfield talk about the Pope, or Dan Westergren about editing, and Connie Phelps, who was the art director, about the processing and laying out of covers. Where do ideas come from? In workshops, often over drinks and sharing life. How pleased and proud of myself was I that I could ask Connie which cover she would choose for this book. She chose the cover I chose. With Jim Richardson, hi Jim, we photographed bulls running through the streets of San Remi, heading to the small bull ring, all while the students hopefully found a cage for protection. With Sissy Brimberg and Cotton Colson, we incorporated local festivities in Arles, or brought dancers to the fort in Siena, here demonstrating bounce lighting techniques. Digital had become available to a new audience at this time, which posed its own learning curve when students unboxed their cameras as they arrived. But it allowed a way of sharing in the field what was being taught, often on early mornings just outside the hotel door. I got to share my connections, like taking Joe McNally's class to the home of Lucien Claire in Arles. It's so important to see original photographs of masters and to be in their homes hearing them discussed, I think even better. I remember Bob Chris sitting in the middle of this empty field, being creative in his point of view lecture. Fields of poppies that were always a draw eluded Tuscany that summer, or that spring. Sparse fields offered possibility for my show me what else it is technique with the translucent reflector. We were 25 people on a bus, but even visits to the famous circle trees in Tuscany happened because students could get off the fast road and walk into the landscape. I see the bus way down there, very tiny, but no doubt we had an aperitif picnic set up at the top of this hill for incentive. We would go to Il Paradiso vineyards where music is played to the vines. Such a joyful experience with Annie Griffith's class to photograph the harvest workers. About to return home, I remember sitting on the Arno River Bridge in Florence, watching the sunset, sharing a great bottle of Brunello with Annie and Eleanor, a student from Brazil. Some moments, just memories of the mind. Tomasz Tomaszewski always found a way to create excitement. It usually involved a dog or a bird to fill every frame of the picture. We taught an advanced class in Greece, but in San Marco Square, he threw seeds to the pigeons over our heads. It was a great idea until we realized that one of the students beside him was petrified of birds. Multiple trips near Carnival were always fun. Jim and I recently reminisced over one story and student from there. Those kinds of conversations over this past year with all the contributors and on some Zoom calls is what made this pandemic process and project so special. By now, I was totally into water images and returned to the baths of San Miguel de Allende with a Spanish student after co-teaching the masterclass with David Allen Harvey and Ralph Lee Hopkins. San Miguel is also another really, really special location where Santa Fe invited me to teach. I think I had made one of my most significant images at those baths the year before when Irma, one of the models in my workshop, had taken me there. Photographing Irma, who was a masseuse and trapeze artist, was such a gift from the very first year. Images in San Miguel are everywhere, including the laundry doorway. I work with student turned friend Matthew Budd on my hacienda roof. He invited her to the States as a masseuse for the healing workshops for women with cancer that we conducted a number of years, continuing that connection. I love working with the same models continually and probably have a 10-year collection of beautiful Irma images, some of them hand painted. After this shoot, I was where I was staying, the class remained for a prepared home-cooked meal while the models created a drum circle and Irma fire danced in the street to the joy of the neighborhood. The ruined silver mines of Pozos were also another dream location for me, still in infrared and handmade processes, but the Santa Fe workshop staff went to great lengths to have students' E6 film processed overnight in Mexico City. It was a 4-hour drive in each direction to facilitate those critiques. It was a different time in photography, one which I think Workshop Stories really captures and is captured in the book. In San Miguel, we photographed then and now in beautiful haciendas with gardens. And one in Otaltonico is really special with a hot tub and a swimming pool and amazing grounds. And it's a location to die for, plus time to explore after the beautiful church and the artisan market right out the door. All classes explore tradition in San Miguel, and even walking home after a class is another gifted opportunity to meet extraordinary people. As we were flying out of Miami, I knew Cuba was going to be an oh so special location, and I was so grateful to be part of that staff. There's color everywhere, and it's a different point of view to explore. We're always invited in. I think the Cubans are as curious as we were and are, and I'm a fool for any place where time has stood still. Kip Brundage, Jorge, and the Cuban staff down there have done an incredible job of making situations available with subjects that could have come from central casting, like here at the tobacco plantation in Vinales. In another small forgotten town, as Pam and I were conversing with this woman, I was passing out beef bouillon cube packages. Small presents, but so appreciated. Every house would welcome students in, and even if you didn't speak the language, it didn't matter. No doubt one of the many Cuban assistants was near. It's truly a way to have a very personal, safe people-to-people exchange. The women's only class explored the strong women of the Cuban culture one year, and the photographs or painted portraits are always one of those few treasured mementos, I think, that in every home you would find. And it's where you could engage the subjects, for me, for my The Way We Were series. I asked that my classes be focused on dance and in unique locations outside of the studio. Cuba was a wonderful opportunity to teach about movement and also about music. This model appears like someone threw her against the ruined wall, but on this day, the entire neighborhood came to watch and listen as the drummers created the beats for the dancers on the street. What an opportunity. We could explore grace within the frame, or ballerinas in Josie's time capsule home, or ponder just how we can all get along like they all seem to there. For me, Cuba was grace and compassion. On a free day, small groups can hire one of the Cuban photographers for the day. I joined Dinah and Barry with Eduardo one Sunday, and we walked the streets sharing stories with people we would meet in the doorways. People are very much outside, and again, we're always invited in. On the same day, I had spotted a lot of over-the-top clothes on a second floor balcony and wondered what was the story. In a heartbeat, Eduardo was bounding up the stairs, knocking on the door. It's where we met Nanelle. I asked if I could return to make a portrait of her, and it was agreed. Dinah and Barry came back with me, and that started the friendship with Nanelle, formerly Richard. Nanelle lived with her husband and mother, who was her dresser. The love and the compassion and the acceptance that the mother showed had me in tears that day. Over the years, through dinners and other visits, I have been able to walk in Nanelle's shoes. She just wants to be seen as a woman, but in that culture, as we walked together to the Malecon to photograph, I understood it is not easy. The Sunday walks were always special for me, whether with Reed or a few students. Things happened if you were open to them and engaged. And used all your senses to find photographs. Passing a gated garden, I heard bleating sounds and looked in. A gentleman came and conversation started, and we were invited to join this young boy's initiation. Language was no barrier, was not a problem, until we later realized the cute baby goat was going to be sacrificed in the Santeria ceremony. Initially, Florence and Anthony felt they couldn't stay, but then agreed in a foreign culture, if invited in, observe, learn, and respect other traditions. Also in those situations, especially with the Santeria, you must ask if you may photograph. In Bejucal, a small town outside of Havana, I quickly learned not to walk with our official Cuban guide. She too understood her uniform represented authority and folks turned away. So she left me to walk alone for a few blocks as I went looking for the students, and then I got asked in. I had invited Aisha from a previous women's workshop in Havana to go back to Cuba and scout Camagüey with me. Everyone needs a traveling companion, and those kindred spirits you will most likely find in a workshop where you share the same sensibilities. A gifted iPhone photographer, she became my translator and sometimes teacher. Even when standing beside me, she could appear invisible. Fabulous traveling companion. For me, Cuba is about walking and about observing life. I have asked and adopted families along the way, trying to give back as much as I can each time I return. This young woman, this young girl stole my heart, and I returned 2 years later to Lesca, the village about an hour from Camagüey. I invited the Cuban photographer Brady's to be my voice while I passed out the 50 or so prints I had for the village from when Aisha and I had gone. I had brought presents and was invited to her quinceañera a few months later. I could not return, but I was happy it gave me a chance and an excuse to leave her a monetary present to help pay for it. In Cuba, there must also be a fair exchange, which you must accept. I got a beautiful rutabaga that day from their garden. I can't wait to go back, but it breaks my heart, for it's a country that's still going through a lot. They're such gentle, soulful people without opportunity. Take a workshop there and also take the time to walk a few blocks to engage. There are meaningful photographs everywhere. Two other notable connections through Santa Fe for me are meeting eye doctor Joe Famartino in my Santa Fe hand coloring workshop nearly 30 years ago, and being introduced to him to Verve Gallery after he moved there. Turns out we were raised 10 minutes from each other in Western Pennsylvania and have been friends since. It's with him that I go on humanitarian eye projects in South America, where I can contribute and give back as a photographer, documenting the gift of sight by following home a dozen of the over 5,000 stories seen in 2 weeks. He printed the limited edition fundraising print, platinum print for workshop stories, which can be found on the website along with the bios and a movie style trailer excerpts. In closing my love poem to workshops, I'll tease with my story from the book, A Beautiful Day with Students at Los Luceros, and a personal assignment, Nude versus Naked, which I gave after the models left. Pick a partner and make a naked portrait of that person. The I am not going to take off my clothes turned into a lesson in listening and a charming critique the next day. Each story in the book is accompanied by a photograph, and I chose one that I made in Santa Fe at Glenna Goodacre's empty black bottom pool. It became a signature mort d'ensage image for me in my career. I'm grateful to now hear from all the others in the book, and I want to thank True North Editions for publishing this with me. I am humbled by the continued support that the workshop students have always shown and that the teachers have shown throughout my career. I hope you'll also support this labor of love and continue to support workshops. The stories are universal, and I'm sure you'll find yourself there. So thank you for showing up today, as always.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Such great stories and such a great friendship, and what a great project that you are nearing completion on. So congratulations to you. And just great stories. It brings back so many great memories. For me, Los Luceros is probably the best location that we've ever had in Santa Fe, and Roger, and just so many great friendships and memories. So thank you for taking me down that trip on memory lane. So now we're going to hear from Alan Ross. And I chose to ask Alan first because he has the most experience teaching workshops, or at least from the start of the workshop world. As far as I know, 2 workshops really started to present education for folks back in the 70s, 1970s, late 60s, I think. Ansel Adams and his workshops at Yosemite, and Sherry and Dave Heiser, who had a workshop in Sun Valley, Idaho, that started out and then moved to Aspen. So those were really the first workshops that I'm aware of that started. And now obviously there's just an amazing number of workshops all around the country and the world. But Alan was a part of the early workshops with Ansel in Yosemite. And he started assisting Ansel in, I think it was 1973. And so he has us all beat in terms of his first workshop experience. So Alan, thanks for joining us, and you've got the stage now for your workshop story. You're muted, Alan. You're muted. Turn your mic on there.
All
there we
right.
go. Perfect. Thanks.
All right. Well, Reed, thanks so much for that introduction. And Elizabeth, you are, as always, a hard act to follow. That your talk and your images were just fabulous. Reed was correct. I took my first workshop, my only workshop I was a student at, actually, 52 years ago. But when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life as a student at Berkeley, I'd already changed majors 3 times, or 2 times before, and I was kind of interested in photography, had been for a long time. And I had this opportunity to take a workshop in the High Sierra with a number of instructors, but 2 of which, one, Al Weber, was a current instructor at Ansel Adams workshops in Yosemite, and another instructor, Perkle Jones, had been Ansel's assistant in the late 1940s. And that workshop changed my life. I was going into it, I was puzzled as to what I wanted to do with my life. Through my photography, I had photographed all the processes involved in silver work, metal work, and wound up being a TA as a silversmithing instructor at Berkeley. But I thought I was going to be a jeweler, but photography still kind of wound up grabbing me. So I guess I'm still sort of a silversmith in a way. But at any rate, that workshop gave me a clear view of what the power of a workshop can be. It literally changed my life. I was done with that, and I decided that I was going to be a photographer. I talked my way into getting an independent major in photography at Berkeley in the design department. None of that existed, but I created one. and one thing led to another and to another and to another. Having some mentors, meeting people and knowing people is an amazing thing in terms of what happens to your life. And workshops are an important way of meeting people. And one way or another, I wound up working for a photographer in San Francisco. Well, actually, my mentor at Berkeley was William Garnett, who had 3 Guggenheim grants for his aerial photography. Then I was introduced to another photographer in San Francisco, a guy named Halberstadt, who knew Ansel Adams. And because of that, I introduced myself to Ansel Adams at Yosemite in 1972. And he invited me to just stay and hang around the workshop for a while. And I met Brett Weston and some other people that were there. And that was just magic. I wound up, my employer, Hal, closed his studio and retired. I was out of a job, and I wrote Ansel and asked him if he needed an assistant. He said, well, no, I don't, but I'd love to have you help out with the workshops we're doing here in Yosemite. So my second workshop was assisting an Ansel Adams workshop in Yosemite in 1973. And those workshops were 2 weeks long. I mean, it was amazing, the energy and all of the people that Ansel brought together in those. And so one of the things about workshops, and I know my time's limited here, is the camaraderie that you get because you're involved with a whole bunch of people that are passionate about what you're passionate about. And one of the other wonderful things is that you relate with other people. You see other images. You see a photograph by somebody saying, I never would have seen it that way. Wow. And it changes your whole view of things. So, there are things like that that are just so extraordinary in workshops. And I'm delighted to say that, most of my wife and my friends have been workshop students. And, we make connections that last a lifetime. I'm actually coaching a photographer that was a student at that Yosemite 1973 workshop, and we're doing weekly, Zoom sessions together with his work that he's developed over the ensuing years. So, there's this connection, but it's sharing a passion, whatever that is so important about workshops. I can go on and have all sorts of little stories about goings on in workshops and surprise things. I told Elizabeth about one that I was when I was Ansel's assistant, started in '74 as his full-time assistant. And we were a Friends of Photography workshop in Carmel, and there was a photographer there that was leading a nude session. And we had a couple of female nude, models and a male. And a couple of the female models kind of got a little carried away with being models together. And, there are some situations that are pretty unique to these gatherings. But one of the other instructors, Henry Gilpin, who was a sheriff's department employee, asked the ladies to quiet things down a little bit. But but workshops, it's the enthusiasm. And Elizabeth was talking about place, and she mentioned 2 of my favorite places in the world that I've been to on workshops. And one of them, thank you, Reed, was Los Luceros, which no longer exists anymore as a comparable place, but it was amazing. And Cuba, I wound up doing a workshop of my own in Cuba a couple of years ago, and it's magical. The people are wonderful. It's impossible to not get involved. But the workshop experience itself has a huge part of that enthusiasm. So I don't want to beat things to death, but it's just seeing others teach. In Ansel's workshops, we had multiple instructors from Yusuf Karsh and Arnold Newman, and just all up and down, Imogen Cunningham, Judy Dater, all this stuff. And but seeing the way different people teach and the kind of work they do, there's this group feeling, and I've never done a workshop ever where I haven't learned something. And so I think that, you know, my blessings go out to anybody that wants to take a workshop. You won't regret it.
I second that. Thank you, Alan. So you're still printing for the Ansel estate, correct?
That's correct. I've been printing Ansel special edition prints now for going on 46 years.
Wow.
Wow.
And every
cool.
time I put Moon and Half Dome in the enlarger, it's like getting together with an old friend.
How lucky is that?
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
Thank you, Alan.
Thanks, Reed. Well, thank you very much for bringing me back into the workshop world here in Santa Fe.
You're welcome. Say hi to Julie. All right, next up is Rennie, who, if you've been to Santa Fe, you know who Rennie is. Don't have to
Hi,
give
Ren.
much introduction here to Rennie. But she is the heart of the workshops and has been for the last, 25 years. I'm not sure how many years it is, Ren, because it's just so long. But Rennie is a photographer. She has helped run the workshops for most of the years of the workshop's life. And I'm happy to say she is still running the workshops with Anne's help in San Miguel. And with any luck, we'll be back in San Miguel this fall for a slate of about a month worth of workshops. So we're all hoping and praying, and I'm optimistic that we can get to San Miguel and join Rennie and Anne and their wonderful staff and the instructors in San Miguel. So Rennie, tell us a little story and keep it clean, please.
Well, okay, I don't have anything to share.
Too bad.
I like Elizabeth, I really thank you, Reed, for looking at my portfolio way back then when I was just getting started in photography. That was 94. And one thing I want to say about Reed is that Reed believes in promoting growth, personal growth, and he spread that across the board. It was not just to participants, but to the staff and to the staff as well. So Reed, thank you for all the opportunities that I were given, sometimes kicking and screaming, but I really do appreciate it, at this point, all the wonderful opportunities. I had the rare pleasure of working at or experiencing the workshop on every level of the workshop side or the production side. And so like in 1995, I was a work study, and that was back in the day of film. And we would meticulously but quickly write up almost 230 rolls of film and run it to the lab. And they would, bless their hearts, Visions Lab, they would process it overnight, and we would pick it up the next morning and have it ready for people. And it was such fun to see people going through all their images, whether it was contact sheets or slides. That was a beautiful thing to watch. And I used to go into classrooms and do that a lot. But anyway, so then I moved into operations, and in operations, I had the real pleasure of working with all of these wonderfully significant photographers that Reed was bringing in to teach with us. And I remember thinking every season, thank God I'm talking to them on the phone, because I would be terrified to talk to Jim Richardson in person. I don't know him. I know him. So, you know, and we would have these a beautiful rapport. I would get an understanding of what they wanted, and then we did our best to provide. And I enjoyed that so much, and I have many, many friends that way through the workshops. But also, one of the wonderful things was hiring the seasonal staff, the support staff. I would block off 2 weeks and devote myself solely to reviewing and interviewing and talking. And so it's like most of those applicants, I always started to say kids, Reed, but I didn't. So
No.
those applicants, they were all technically sound and pretty even across the board. But the main thing that counts when it comes to like being there for people, it's people skills. And so it was so important to talk to them, and it was a great challenge always to come up with what was a perfect staff. And I think our staff always was just hands down great. I missed a couple, but that's that's life. But I've made so many long-term friends through the seasonal staff. I'm still friends with so many of them, and I know Elizabeth talked to that, and so did Alan, about these people that show up that we have that commonality, and that's photography, and then we just explore together and push each other, and it's such a beautiful thing. 1997 was probably the best summer. The summer of 97 was probably the best summer of my life. And that's because I moved from operations into course assisting or course coordinating. And so I got to assist a new instructor every week, and it was really intimidating because, and it was a beautiful thing. It was like image would come up, and this is in critique, and I had my immediate response, and the instructor would say something totally different. And I was just like, oh my God, I don't know anything about photography. But it's a learning process. And my hat is off to all the participants, because I finally got to be a student and experience what that feels like to interpret the homework, what's my assignment and how am I going to do this, and then turn it in, edit for it, and then turn it in and have it critiqued. It takes courage. And I just really, really want to acknowledge all of the participants that put themselves out there the way you do. You commit to a week of pushing yourself. And I know there was this rhythm. We start off Sunday with a lot of excitement and anticipation. Nobody really knows each other. I don't know, sometimes there were repeats that would, but here Sunday, Monday, and then here comes Wednesday, and you have tears of breakthrough, tears of breakdown, and just the whole gamut of just people going through their process, which is why you have to have people with good people skills, which we did. So my hat's off to you. I know what it feels like. And Reed, like I said, supported growth. And so he invited me to teach 5 different times and talk about growing. I mean, the first thing that came to my mind was instructor presentation. Oh my God. And but he supported me through that, and I appreciate it so much, Reed. It was, and like Alan said, you do learn something from everyone. So I have a little story to tell about Mexico, because Mexico is, I love being down there. It's one of my favorite things I ever did with the workshops. And so one year I was down there, and Jennifer Spellman happened to be my housemate. That didn't happen very often. In fact, probably never again. But she was my housemate, and we had a Sunday to ourselves, Sunday morning, and we were cleaning up, and we were going to wash the dishes because, wow, it had a dishwasher. And so we put some liquid soap in. Everybody knows you don't do that, but we were trying to make do. So we were upstairs and came back downstairs, and the floor was full of bubbles, just all the way to the front door. And so we got through that. We had a lot of laughs, and we were kidding around. And then we get this phone call. One of the instructors had a problem with her passport, and she was not going to make it for the Sunday night and all day Monday. And Spellman and I kind of changed gears real quick, and we were just like, well, this is what operations did. It's problem solving. And anyway, we kind of had this conversation, and I kind of looked at her like, well, you could do that first day. And so, God bless her heart, this story is called Bubbles and Breakthroughs. We're busting through them, because we busted through all the bubbles, got that out of the way, and then she agreed to do that. And that was her teaching debut. And she's one of the success stories that I'm just incredibly proud of. Not only is she an amazing, amazing teacher, she is one of my dearest friends. And yeah, I have many more stories, but I'm just going to end with that one because good enough.
You've been around the workshop world as long as you and I have, Rennie. We have lots and lots of stories. We could go on forever and ever, but there were some good ones there. So thank you very much.
Yes.
Appreciate it. Next up is John Paul Capenegro, who lives in Cushing, Maine, but he grew up in Santa Fe. There's lots of commonality here between John Paul and the workshops. Actually, the very first summer of the workshops in 1990, we rented Paul Capenegro, his dad's house outside of Santa Fe for our staff. And there's a great story there at some point I can tell. But John Paul grew up right across the street from the workshops, going to Santa Fe Prep, and his mom is still in Santa Fe and his dad's close by him in Cushing. So there's this great synergy between Maine, where I am now, and Santa Fe. So it's a pleasure to welcome JP to the forefront here to tell us his workshop story. JP?
Thank you, Reed, and thank you for doing the math. I think we're all feeling a little older tonight.
Yes.
I think you are reminding me that I was probably 9 years old when I met you up in Maine.
Wow.
We stayed in touch ever since. Do you remember the first digital printing workshop at Santa Fe? Are these things going to work?
I remember those days early on. Yeah, that was a big transition between film and digital. It was scary.
Yeah. Do you remember the name of that TA that you had one summer who was dressed in even more black than I was, with the black fingernails and the piercing? He couldn't have gotten more goth, and he had the blackest portfolio. It was like the ultimate nihilist statement: is not necessarily untitled. Rennie?
I don't remember. Do you remember Rennie?
Thank you for pairing us, because he was brilliant. Twisted, but brilliant. It was fantastic. Really wonderful, wonderful people. And I think that's one of the best things about the community. I mean, the workshop, I mean, the community. I want to thank you, Reed and Rennie, and everybody at the workshops for building a community and for sustaining it. Taking a workshop sometimes can really be a dream come true. And it's a rare opportunity to come together and share like really special, rare experiences. But I think the most special thing about it is seeing through each other's eyes. As a workshop facilitator for many years, I always feel it's my privilege to help shepherd people into a deeper relationship with their vision, to help them make that discovery, not necessarily to teach people the way that I see, but to help them see in many ways and then find the ways that are right for them. And it was really interesting for me to be in a situation where I'm half taking, half leading a workshop. The workshop story that I share in Elizabeth's book was the first time that I went to Antarctica, which for me was a dream come true. Elliot Porter was a significant influence to me as a young man. My mother oversaw the production of many of his books. He lived right down the street in Tasuki. And in fact, you mentioned I went to Santa Fe Prep right across the street from Santa Fe. He actually showed up on Earth Day to give us a talk about one of our favorite subjects, ecology and the environmental movement and the rest of it. But when I saw Elliot late in his 70s go down to Antarctica on a National Science Foundation grant, this was long before there was any tourism. You had to have a special permission to be able to get down there and come back absolutely thrilled. I made a wish very quietly, and you got to be careful what you wish for. In this case, I'm very glad I did make the wish. I want to go to Antarctica to see this magnificent place at the bottom of the world, so distant. So I think it was 2004. I took stock of my life, got real clear about my bucket list, and put Antarctica right on the top. Said, it's still with me all these years later. This must be 20 plus years later. And about 6 weeks later, Michael Reichman calls me up and says, "Hey, JP, do you want to come and teach a workshop in Antarctica?" I said, would I? I seized that one quickly. I said, I think so much of it is just being clear on your intention. And then when the opportunity passes by, you're able to seize it. It's a lot like photography. So he also invited Seth Resnick, Jeff Shiwi, and paired me with Stephen Johnson, two digital photographers, but we couldn't be more different in our vision. It was pretty wonderful. And I remember the first time as we got across the Drake, and this is after 2 days of bouncing around at 38-degree rolls. We literally had to wedge ourselves into our cabins so that we could try and get a little sleep as we slid back and forth in our cots. It had finally calmed down. It was our first glimpse of big ice, and we all rushed to the decks. And Seth shows up with this giant 300mm lens, and I show up with my 28mm lens, and we both do a double take, say, like, what do you see? Give me your camera. Let me see. In other words, I want to see through your eyes. We were lucky enough to be able to go back many times. We've been 12 times now, but on the second time, very similar story. Similar Drake experience, big ice on the horizon. Seth shows up with a wide angle lens. I show up with a long lens. We just laughed. We had learned to see through each other's eyes, but also in our own ways. We weren't making each other's pictures. We were not only learning new tools, but also learning new ways of seeing. So I think we finally got it right on the third time when same thing happened again, and we both showed up with two cameras, one long lens, one wide lens. And we've been having this marvelous visual conversation since 2005, and been very lucky to be able to see the same places at the same time through a larger community's vision, to have 12, 18 people, as you do in most workshops, a dozen folks go to the same places at the same time and come away with such different images. It, to me, is very encouraging. It shows the kind of the wonder and diversity of the individual perspective, and that to be able to shepherd that, finding a unique or an authentic point of view and to help that bloom is an extreme privilege. It's really one of the reasons I got into photography. I left painting for this strange little mechanical device because I was absolutely fascinated that two people with the same machines could point their cameras at the same thing at the same time and come away with such different results. Somehow our ghosts got into that machine, and they still do, no matter what we use. So it's been a rare opportunity to grow visually with a lot of people, to make a lot of friends. Yes, I, like others, I'm not sure exactly how long the list of people who have found their life partners, but I'm one of them. I met my wife, Artie, there. Reed, yep. It's quite extraordinary, but also the enduring friendships. People who I taught at that first workshop in Santa Fe, still in contact with them, still growing visually and sharing images and continuing that visual conversation. Real privilege, and I want to thank you again for building and fostering and sustaining that community.
Thank you, JP. There's certainly a commonality here going on. It's all about friendships and connections. I can say the same thing. My best friends are people that I've met in workshops, and I think pretty much everybody on this panel would say the same thing, and probably all of you listen in could say the same thing if you've done a number of workshops. It's just a great community to meet like-minded people and then take it from there. So thanks, JP. Next up is Jennifer Spellman, who's in Santa Fe, and Rennie gave her already a little bit of an introduction. She is one of the great stories that come out of Santa Fe, and it is about being a student initially, and then being on our staff for a number of years, and then moving into teaching. And now Jennifer is the one person who's taught the most workshops in Santa Fe. No one has taught more workshops for us than Jennifer. And that's in Santa Fe, that's in San Miguel, that's in Cuba, that's in India, that's in Japan. And this fall in Romania and Morocco, just goes on and on and on. So what that means to all of you is, as Rennie said, she's a great teacher. So if you get a chance, sign up for something with Spellman, online or in person. around the world. So with that minor introduction, it's all yours, Jennifer.
Thanks, Reed. Oof, I'm having like such a familiar workshops experience right now, which is one of being an exquisite company and always somehow shaking my head a little bit as to how this all happened this way. 15 years ago, I came to the workshops as a participant. It was actually paid for in part by the Jefferson County District Attorney's Office. And I had a degree in criminalistics and forensics. And I liked the idea of being a photographer, but I don't think it had ever really seemed like a career path. And man, they hooked me right off the bat at the workshops. I can remember Reed and Rennie, the very first Sunday night, speaking about focusing on one thing, letting go of everything else in your life, and just for 1 week, having permission to have fun. And I think I needed that message really loudly in that moment. And the next day I found myself in a class with Sig Harvey, and I had pretty shady technical skills at this moment. And she opened the door to these ideas about metaphor, and that you could put in a photograph your feelings about love and loss. And my head just about exploded because I had no idea. I really thought it was about standing in front of something beautiful. And I spent 8 weeks that summer going from instructor to instructor, having similar experiences to that. And I got so hooked on how intense the workshops weeks were that you could learn so much when you put aside everything else. I think I assisted for almost 3 years straight. And I remember having a moment somewhere along the way where I thought, why do these instructors actually share all of their secrets? They've kind of got an edge on something. Why are they willing to tell me every single thing I want to ask about a photograph? And I realized I wasn't ready to teach at that point because I still didn't understand that. And years later, it's equally fun to be on the other side of flipping those switches with people. And moments through Mexico and Cuba when I started traveling with the workshops changed the way I interacted with people. I can remember the first time walking across the Aldea campus in San Miguel with Rennie Hyduke and Narissa Escanlar, and the gardener hopped down from the tree he was in or ran across the courtyard and gave the two of them this incredibly deep hug. And that happens everywhere the workshops goes. They taught me how to go into other communities and really connect with that place. And 2011, I started working in Cuba with the workshops, and wow, there's stories from there. The best thing I can say though is over this last year of the pandemic, I've gotten to be a little bit of a bridge between all these people in Cuba and all of the participants who have went and had such a deep experience. And it's not the photographs that anybody I think is really missing. It's all of those friendships and connections. And it's this bridge that the workshops acts as any place that it goes. I almost feel like we could be selling apple pies in Cuba and I still would be more than happy to be a part of it. And I loved, Elizabeth, when you were sharing about going back to places, because you see that happen over and over again. And I think I needed this last year to catch up on sleep, because I think 14 years, I basically have been trying to be involved in as many workshops as I can. And it's a beautiful community of friends. Thank you all. And thank you so much, Elizabeth. I'm honored to be a part of this book.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Also, great memories. I appreciate you being part of our family and community in Santa Fe. Another person who's been a part of our family for a long time is Jim Richardson, who's a geographic photographer who we met along with a lot of other geographic photographers in those years that we produced workshops for National Geographic. Those were wonderful, wonderful years that we collaborated with Nat Geo. And I can't think of a greater honor for us than to be asked to produce workshops for National Geographic, and then introduced us to so many photographers, including Jim, that worked with us in Santa Fe, and and in Europe with Elizabeth, and we're still working with Jim. Even though we're not working with Geographic anymore, we're working with Jim. He's actually scheduled to teach a travel with an iPhone workshop. Come a long ways. He's using iPhones in a lot of his work. So he's teaching a workshop online in May with us. So it's been a long, wonderful relationship with this great photographer, Jim Richardson. So Jim, your story.
You bet. Reed, thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction. But you know, more, thank you for letting me be part of this evening and be part of this group. And I just sit here looking around at all these people. And Elizabeth, having worked with you in the field, I know you personally, but I also know this incredible effort you put together to draw together all these experiences of so many people. I saw that page come up there, and I looked at that list of names, and I thought, you mean my name's in there somewhere? This is pretty cool. You know, really. This is amazing. So thank you so much for this, and for the kind of camaraderie, the shared experiences, the way the visions of so many of these people who have been participated in these workshops and the Santa Fe workshops have changed the world over all that time. So for this evening, I thought I would hark back quite a ways to another era, really, clear back to, I think it was 1973. I was a very young photographer. I had hair. I was a swashbuckling staff member at the Topeka Capital Journal under Rich Clarkson. And along on that staff were other photographers like, well, Brian Lanker, a name some of you may have heard. And Rich chose me amongst the staff that year to go to the Missouri Photo Workshop. Now, 50 years ago, so that was 48 years ago. The Missouri workshop was very much entrenched in the old style of workshops. That was basically boot camp with a camera, and all the instructors were drill sergeants, and they relished the role. I can say, you know, and so there was a whole lot of intimidation going on, and a lot of guilt shifting, and so but I was so incredibly impressed to be there, because, you know, on the faculty was Rich Clarkson, Brian Lanker was there, Bob Gilka, John Derniak, Howard Chapnick, all these people who are just, you know, iconic legends in the field of that era that were there on the faculty. So, well, I had chosen for my story to shoot that week. Having come from a small town, I chose to do a story on this little town in Washington, Missouri. And my story was that suburbia comes to the small town, that this wasn't just remote. All kinds of things were happening and changing. They were building new houses, and they were getting fast food, and just all the things were changing, you know. So, but it was a really tough story to shoot, and I was really, really struggling. And I latched onto a picture that I really needed, and that was that Washington, Missouri now had a Kentucky Fried Chicken. And so I determined that, aha, there's a picture, if I can do it, you know. Somebody coming out of Kentucky Fried Chicken carrying a couple of buckets of chicken, you know, that would be a good picture. So I staked out in the parking lot there at the Kentucky Fried Chicken, and I waited and I waited and I waited, and I tried not to get distracted. And then I looked away for a moment. I looked back, and here was this guy coming with 2 big buckets of Kentucky Fried Chicken. And it was the picture I needed, but he was already too far there. Now, you must understand that the ethos of the Missouri Photo Workshop at the time was you never, ever set up a picture. Not ever, not no way, not nothing, you know. But I was in such a panic, you know, that I had shot one picture too late after that, you know. And so I went to the guy. He was getting in his car, and I said, would you mind just kind of go back over to the door there and come walking out again? Would you? Okay, you know, don't tell anybody. And so he said, yeah, sure. So He does. He comes walking out. I get my picture. All right. We developed the film. We're at the critique, I think, that evening. And Brian Lanker, my fellow there, was on the faculty, as I mentioned. Brian had just won Photographer of the Year, Newspaper Photographer of the Year, and in the next year or so, he would win a Pulitzer Prize. And he was really feeling his oats as a drill sergeant photo critic here and at the workshop. And he said, as this picture came up of this guy coming out carrying the Kentucky Fried Chicken, he says, I wonder if the photographer here would mind explaining how it is that the man came out once and then in another frame, he's coming out again. He had me. He absolutely had me, you know. And I was in a panic. Oh my God, this would end my career. People would know that I had cheated, you know. So I got up and I didn't know what I was going to say. And I was in a panic, but my mouth was moving and words were coming out. And I'm trying to think of what I'm going to say. And I'm going to say, the man was coming out carrying the chicken. And I still don't know what I'm going to say next. And he's carrying the chicken and he's coming towards me. And then he said, oh, I forgot the ketchup. And he went back. and everybody in the audience erupted in laughter. And Brian sat there fuming. He knew I had him, you know, so that set me on my course in photography. And I wish I could say that the lesson that I learned was never tell a lie, but that's not the lesson I got out of it. The lesson I got out of it was always have a story. So thank you for letting me be part of this and to share that with you, and also to be part of everything that's going on here.
Right, thank you, Jim. Words to live by, always have a story. You heard from Jim Richardson. And he had a career, so he didn't get relegated to the dump heap by Brian Lanker. He actually got himself out of it, and we've all benefited by seeing so many wonderful images from Jim over the years. So keep it up, Jim. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have heard from everybody, running a little bit late. So if you have to sign off, then obviously do that. We've got recordings and that'll be available if you want to tune back in. We'll have a little bit of Q&A here. We don't have too many questions. So I want to have a chance right now to have Elizabeth talk a little bit about the book and what stage it's in and what does it cost. And let's do a little shameless plug for the book, because the book actually got us here and has us this evening. So I want to do a little marketing for Elizabeth's book, because it's an amazing book from what I've seen so far. So tell us what's happening with the book right now, Elizabeth.
Okay, so the book is being printed as we speak. It's going to be showing up. I'm not sure when. I just heard from Rob Gage, who is in the book, who said that there's boats from the LA, where he is in LA, all the way out to Catalina Island. So, you know, there's a lot of backlog that's kind of just starting to happen because of the pandemic. But this is the cover, as you've seen, and, you know, here it is, and an amazing group of people. So I'll just give you like the interior, and then sadly, this one's just blank. But I'm supposed to be getting my dummy probably in the next couple of weeks, and then the books will be arriving hopefully within a month or so. There is a website, workshopstories.com, and we're still having the pre-sale. So the pre-sale is at $75 plus the shipping, but you can, you know, you'll be able to order it later, but you're going to save at least $10 because it's going to be an $85 book. It's 250 pages, something like that. It's big. It's got 100 stories, I think 8 essays. And then also I noticed, Reed, behind you, I see 2 pictures that are in the book. Arnold Newman's, the book of the his Stravinsky picture, but the contact sheet version where you see the crop marks, because I got to choose whichever photograph I wanted for the book. And his assistant wrote the story and his kids got on with me. And I see Eva's picture, Eva Rubenstein. She was one of the very first people in teaching in Maine. She's in the book. And that picture that's up on the wall, that's 2 of the 5 you have hanging back there that are in the book.
Yeah.
It's really, the book is really, it's more the earlier years. It starts with everybody talking, like Alan and everybody else talking about Ansel Adams workshops. And then it goes through, to present ones, current teachers like Rennie, and Jennifer. I asked some people from today to also be a voice, to give a balance to it, but it really is kind of about the old days of film and all the workshops that started that got us to kind of where we are. And the stories, they're all over. They're inspirational, they're funny, some are sad, they're poignant. I go back and I look at it again now, and truthfully, I've been working on it for a year, and when I go back and read the stories now, each time I find something else. I'm actually surprised, because I had been reading these stories for a year and editing, and I'm going back and I always come away with other tidbits. And more than anything, the one thing that does come out is sort of this camaraderie of workshops. So I'm glad that Santa Fe is getting back into doing them again. If I had my druthers, I wouldn't be publishing a book in a pandemic project, because everybody's life shifted so much in this year. The focus has changed. So, a request might have become 100 procrastinations, for getting information out. But in the end, everybody came through, and very few people turned me down. I only ever invited maybe 125, and there's 100 stories in the book. So it really speaks to the community of workshops.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you so much for the project, completing it. I know it wasn't easy, and it's a great book from what I've seen. I've seen the PDF, and it really is. And I've only just scratched the surface in terms of reading the stories, but it'll be treasured when we get it. That's for sure. So
I think, Reed, the other thing, it's not just stories, it's the pictures, because everybody gave me one of their pictures from their career. And there are some, some of them are iconic, but some are just images that they have loved. So it's also a book of 100 photographs or more.
Mm-hmm. Right. All right. Well, we're well past our appointed end time, and there aren't that many questions. So I think we'll just pass on the Q&A. And I appreciate everyone joining us. We had a good group tonight. And thank you all panelists for your stories and your energy, and just being part of the community, the workshop community. That's just not Santa Fe. That's Maine. That's Anderson Ranch. That's Julia Dean. That's the Summit. All the different workshops that are around the country and the world are part of this family and part of this community that we're all benefiting from. So my thanks to everybody for joining in tonight. And thank you, Zach, for facilitating and making us look good in this Zoom platform. So I want to mention just a few of the upcoming programs that we have at the Santa Fe workshops. In a week and a half, we have a special program with Nevada Weir and Eddie Soloway called The Thoughtful Traveler. So it's a 2-evening program about getting back to traveling and practical tips on how to go and what to pack, and also ideas on how to make photographs that are important and compelling in these places away from home. And then we have a program with Maggie Taylor coming up in April about compositing your images using Adobe Photoshop. John Paul is going to join together with Sean Kernan, another great friend of ours, to have a conversation. I'm not sure what about, but I'm sure, knowing JP, it'll be intriguing and special. That's on the 28th of April. That's another Creativity Continues. That's a free event. The first 2 you have to pay for. And then the third one I want to bring up is Pay's Instagram strategies for photographers. Pay used to be on our staff, now works for Adobe, and is an Instagram influencer. And so she's going to spend 2 hours on Saturday afternoon, the 24th of April, talking about Instagram and how photographers should use it and should not use it. So 4 programs coming up in April that might be of interest to you. You can find out about them on our website. So once again, my thanks to everybody for tuning in. Thank you to all of you folks that are telling stories, and particularly to Elizabeth and this really amazing project that you're nearing the finish line. And I'm proud of you, and I love you. So good night, all. Thanks for joining us.
Bye, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach.
Thanks, Zach.
Bye. Good to see you all again. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.